Former employees of fast food restaurants. What are some dirty secrets your chain or single restaurant didn't want your customers to know? Story 1 worked at Burger King in the 1990s. Aside from half the crew being permanently stoned, there were no real shenanigans. We wouldn't serve anything that hit the ground, made most things to order, threw out old and stale. We even threw out the frozen meat we played frisbee with. Not a restaurant, but we serve food too. The 7 tub of popcorn you buy at a movie theater costs about 9 to make. Story 2 Papa John's driver here. A cheese pizza dipped in garlic sauce is the same exact thing as a cheese stick dipped in marinara sauce, only it costs about twice as much. If you get cheese pizzas and dip them in the garlic sauce, just start asking for cheese sticks with 2 pizza sauces. You'll save yourself some money. Story 3 worked at Panera for 4 years. 1. All soups came in frozen and we just heated them up in plastic bags. This goes for the mac and cheese as well and many of the pastries, cookies, etc. 2. Our bakers only put things in the oven. The dough was mixed elsewhere and shipped to the store. 3. Home-style lemonade, tap water and mix. Fresh squeezed OJ, poured from a carton to a cup, iced green tea, tap water and mix. 1. People had a misconception that Panera was healthy fast food. Quite the opposite. Calorie counts are online. Lastly, not a dirty secret but something positive. Any leftover bread and pastries were donated at the end of the night to local food banks, soup kitchens or churches. Story 4 McDonald's for 5 years. When you're trained they encourage you to look for golden moments, which are essentially targeting children and making them feel special. Story 5 I didn't work here, but it was national news. The Taco Bell down the street from me was closed for a few days and everyone was fired because the late shift pooped in the beans. Story 6 Former McD's employee. The burgers are what seems like 50 oily fat. The seasoning that goes on the patties is salt pepper mixed together. Also, the fries are made with animal byproduct. Whatever that is, the only thing that is safe to eat I guess, or at least the only thing I ever had while I worked there was the apple pies. I wouldn't trust anything else, even though like others have said food was handled properly and whatnot. Surprisingly enough, I also worked at a university kitchen and let me tell you, those places are pretty nice, except for the washrooms. The Platiscups utensils come through the steam washer so fast and are so hot that it's impossible to do a thorough check on each plate. Also, when things drop on the floor after cleaning they are just thrown back on the rack. Sneak it back into the dirty plates pile for another go through. At the end of a 4-hour shift your hands are numb, burned, and you don't even want to think about working there ever again. Edit here are some other things I learned working at McD's. 1. It's significantly cheaper to order a McDouble and get it dressed like a Big Mac. 2. You can order your burgers without seasoning to cut down on a lot of sodium intake. 3. Ask for extra pickles. They will usually give you 2 to 3 times as much, and every once in a while you'll get a lot of extra pickles. Onions are the same. 4. The ketchup and mustard that goes on burgers is much more concentrated than the stuff they have outside. 5. On tax day some stores sell Big Macs 1 for an extra penny. 6. If you are getting iced tea ask for Leno ice. The iced tea is already chilled, and cutting the ice nets you a lot more iced tea. 7. McD's is in pretty big competition with Dunkin' Donuts or similar coffee shop in your area when it comes to selling coffee. 8. The only thing made with real eggs in the morning is the Egg McMuffin. 9. Stores like this make a huge of their profit off of soft drinks. 10. A tenth referring to 110 pounds or regular patty costs about 16 cents. 11. When you start working there you go through roughly 6 hours of training slideshows on a PC in the beginning. If you get a job there don't bother paying much attention because afterwards they just have someone show you what to do. That makes a lot more practical sense. 12. Don't show up drunk to work, you'll get fired. Stoned. 13. My managers were awesome. I got yelled at once, but it was my second day and I upped pretty hard. 14. Don't tear chicken nugget bags way the open. Those things become projectile. 15. Trash duty and cleaning the screens on the grills are the worst 2 jobs, especially screens. 16. Employees get half off a meal either before or after their shift. Managers can eat whenever they like for free, but give up their 30-minute break for every 6 hours of work. 17. Don't work 6 hours and 1 minute straight. You'll probably get fired. 18. Don't expect overtime. 19. 90 of the females are large fat and 90 of the males are skinny twigs. 20. Don't expect to be working with the brightest bunch, but most are generally nice. 21. Expect to burn your hands, and have the marks never go away. 22. Generally new employees won't work their way up to 20 hours a week until at least a few months in. 23. You work holidays, you don't get paid extra. 24. You will smell like grease, even after only a 3-hour shift. Shower required. 25. Don't work at McDonald's. Edit 2 I also saw someone order over 600 chicken nuggets once. We've had orders of over 100 burgers too. Edit 3 This is from my phone which is a pitta to reply with. For instance it just corrected pitta to potato. Anyways I do digress. The instance where I was yelled at wasn't really all too big of a deal, but what happened is that we were backorded on chicken strip and nuggets during supper time. It was super busy and I was on the fryers. I didn't know we were backorded and was sitting there with the chicken just hanging to dry for like 5 minutes. My manager was pissed and flipped, the one and only time. In 2008 I had a job at a Food Avenue in Target. One day my dad went into the hospital, and since I wasn't allowed to take calls while at work, I spent the day not knowing what was going on. I sobbed into your pizzas. I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, all over those pizzas. So if you had an extra salty pizza from a Target in South Florida in 2008, it was because you were eating my tears. Story 7. Former McDonald's employee checking in. Like it's been said, not much went on in the way of shady hygiene practices that I saw. Managers were always on our asses to keep the place clean. If you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean. This basically meant we weren't allowed to sit or lean during our shifts, though I took ample opportunities to lean on the counter, which served two purposes. It made me appear genuinely interested in customer 3249, and it allowed my feet a much-needed respite. Our location was on a highway in one of those rest areas, and so there was a few businesses under one roof. One of these was a donut place, and people would often turn their noses up at McDonald's coffee and order their food there, only to go right over to the donut place and get coffee. The kicker, we owned and operated both places. They were literally connected in the back, and we shared employees, and more importantly, coffee. TLDR people often waited in two lines to get a coffee they insisted was better when it was actually exactly the same. Story 8. I worked at a Tim Hortons all through high school and a bit of university. The always fresh stuff is kind of bull. Everything is frozen and reheated when they need to be served. The donuts, the eggs and the breakfast sandwich, and any baked good was all frozen, put in the oven and then served. My location, however, was strict about the 20-minute rule on our pots of coffee. Story 9. I worked at Starbucks for a while. Overall, everything was really clean and fresh. I got to take home expired foods at the end of the night because they had really strict expiration rules, and expired food wouldn't really expire for another few days. But hey, race a tip: if you're ever at Starbucks, you will get decaf or sugar-freed or non-fatted. I always felt like an evil mastermind when someone ordered their Quad 27 pump mocha because I would decaf all 4 shots and only give them the recommended amount of pumps. Mwahaha. Edit. Apparently, I wasn't clear that I would only do this to people that were being very rude to me for no reason, except that their overpriced mediocre coffee drinks are more important to them than treating people in the service industry like human beings. I also guess I will specify that I worked in a rich community Starbucks, so I encountered more dicks than the average barista. I would never under any circumstances do the opposite, i.e., caffeinating or sugaring or whole ng someone's drink, in case of medical issues. I hated the rude customers, but I don't want to be responsible for someone's diabetic coma or pacemaker going wacko. Story 10. I used to work at Subway. My manager at the time was really conscious of food costs, to a fault. Most commonly was changing the expiration dates of food so it wouldn't have to be thrown out. This may not be a huge deal for a couple days, but food would last a couple weeks. He would also take lettuce in a pan and put it back into the bag. Finally, he kept frozen unbaked bread for over a year. It was so old that the yeast had died, causing the bread to not rise. He was fired after I got fed up and blew the whistle to the franchise owner. Story 11. It's been nearly 15 years now, but I worked at McDonald's. In general it was not terrible, with one exception: shakes. Shakes have their own machine separate from ice cream, or at least they did. I understand the McCafe thing may have changed shakes around. At that time though, the ice cream was low fat, but the shakes weren't. They had their own mix. The same mix was used by all the shakes, and then a syrup was added by the machine, for flavors, vanilla, chalk, strawberry and the seasonal flavor e.g. shamrock, but when I was working it was mango, and it lasted forever because it didn't sell. You open up the bottom back of the machine and you basically put in this big open metal container like a big bucket, basically, and stick a tube in it. Now, the front of the machine with a spout and stuff does get cleaned each night, but most of the innards of the machine were never touched. They were completely infested with cockroaches in the inner workings. When you'd open the back to refill the bucket, it'd be all skitter 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 while the cockroaches would run and hide. The idea of this big roach swimming pool of shake mix permanently put me off McDonald's shakes or any fast food shakes whatsoever. The shake mix would sit in there all day from opening, because people did actually order shakes at breakfast. So it'd sit in there all day with the roaches from about 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. or so, then stored in the fridge, and pulled back out. The rotation was terrible too. You'd usually just dump more stuff in on top because otherwise people would terribly because the shake machine was down while it was cleaned or coming to temp, for whatever reason, lower temp, different works. We never had this problem with the ice cream machine, which was like 3 feet away. Just the shake machine. Some of the employees figured out how to rig the shake machine to dispense just syrup, so they could make vanilla cokes and stuff. The syrups weren't in open buckets or anything, I think plastic packs. Never replaced them, so it was probably okay, but I didn't partake. Oh, and our ice cream machine broke. The night manager decreed it right after July fireworks, so that we didn't have to do about 1,000 cars getting nothing but ice cream cones. Instead we hung out on the roof. Story 12. I once ate at a pie shop that was right below a barber shop. Their meat pies were good, but there was something off about that barber, Mr. Todd, I think his name was. Story 13. I know that at Pizza Hut Express, they throw out unpurchased pizzas every 20 minutes. Since I thought this was such a food waste, I would stockpile them on days my manager wasn't working and take them home. Elite pizza that's been sitting out for days. I work at BK the King. The grossest thing I've ever seen happen in my store is something a customer did. Midway through this lady's meal she decides her baby's diaper is full, so she changes it, on the table, right next to her food, and as the baby is lying in ketchup she proceeds to shove French fries down her grotesque gullet. Story 14. I worked at Pizza Hut, and one time I saw a man come by whose job it was to simply go around and eat at every Pizza Hut and grade them. He looked exactly like this. Story 15 McDonald's. The veggie patties are always in contact with meat products. They get cooked on the same grill as the patties and no one cleans the area of beef fat beforehand. Red Robin, check your burgers to ensure they're cooked. Chicken and beef patties are taken off the grill before they're finished. The hot juices inside will continue to cook the meat, but this is borderline during busy hours. It's not uncommon to see burgers get sent back to the kitchen uncooked. Story 16 Quick rant. Sorry, I've worked in fast food restaurants my whole life. I can tell you that if you expect any dirty secrets that a corporation would have in place, you will find nothing. A major national fast food chain depends on reputation for sales. The finger in the chili incident, which was fraud, caused double-digit sales decline for Wendy's and affected the chain for years. A food poisoning outbreak can kill a business, however. With that being said, most all restaurants are franchised. What a franchise does could be totally different as far as their dirty secrets. They might keep food past expiration to help food costs. Since it sounds like most of you steal food, they have to control costs somehow. I can tell you that for the most part though, the food prepared in a fast food restaurant is done under conditions and handling much safer than you cook your own food at your own house. The food safety standards are extremely high. Story 17 Where I used to live, there is a smaller town about 10 miles out with a bar restaurant famous for its roasted chicken. People drive from miles around to eat there. I grew up eating there on occasion with family. In high school, I decided to get a job there. Quite often I would catch employees who have been there for years, dropping chicken from the broaster onto the filthy floor they never cleaned, then sticking it onto a customer's plate. One morning, a veteran employee was showing me how to mix up the batch of coleslaw that gets plopped onto every plate of famous chicken. Using her bare hands, she mushed and squished away, then suddenly had to sneeze. She turned her head away from the bowl, blew saliva blobs all over the walk-in cooler door, wiped her nose and mouth with the back of her hand, then plunged those babies back into the coleslaw. I quit. I refused to eat there anymore. It's still very popular to the locals. Story 18 I worked at the regional sandwich shop chain Jimmy John's for 4 years during high school. Although there weren't any secrets per se, plenty of disturbing things happened that made me question ever eating there again. One, I grab a head of lettuce to start slicing it. I'm not sure why, but some instinct told me break it in half just to make sure the inside was okay. So I cut the head in half, and to my horror, see a swarming mass of hundreds of tiny black bugs living on the inside of the lettuce head. Turns out the entire shipment of lettuce is like this. We have been serving it to people for days. 2 Another lettuce story. A woman orders a sandwich then sits down to eat. Normal enough. After a few minutes, she comes back to the register, a look of horror on her face. She turns to the customer who I'm currently taking an order from and says to him, "You should step away, you may not want to see this." With the other customer gone, the woman opens her hand and in her palm are small shards of glass. They were in her sandwich. We examine the lettuce, and sure enough it is riddled with glass. Luckily it was a relatively new batch, so we had only been serving it for a few hours. As for how it got in there, we had no idea. Our best guess is someone from the previous shift had broken a light bulb or something over the food and had failed to tell anyone. 3 My first manager loved to throw up knives and catch them in crazy ways. So one day he comes in right after we had sharpened the bread knives, and anyone who has worked at Jimmy John's knows that the knives are sharp as already. So he decides to do this overly ambitious trick where throws 2 knives, spinning end over end, behind his back and catches them with the opposite hands. Well, the knives went into the air just fine, but on the way down ended up deeply gashing both his exposed wrists and nearly cutting off his thumb, which luckily hung on by a thread. Literally, there was a lot of blood that day. For I had a manager with a terrible whooping cough, you know, the kind of cough that just sounds wet, disgusting, full of phlegm. Anyway, he would hack right into his hands, then proceed to handle the food. He didn't work there very long. Those are just off the top of my head. I'm sure there's more, but I'm drawing a blank right now. Story 19 Movie theater. The big bucket of popcorn has the same amount of popcorn as the biggest bag, which is a few dollars cheaper. Not exactly an evil scam, but still is good to know. Story 20 Worked at a gas station called Quick Trip in high school. Best job ever. Food times were adhered to. Fresh food brought in every morning. Cleaned the bathrooms every 30 minutes. Mopped the entire store every 30 minutes and faced the store and cleaned all the glass hourly. Also, had to take a 2-week academy to learn all kinds of, to include making change on the spot from any denomination without a computer doing the work. A skill I still retain today. I loathe people who are slow at making change, and old people in line in front of me who use these fabled things known as checks. Story 21 If you get the baked fish at Captain DS, it's actually just a fillet of whiting fish, a little butter and seasoned salt, microwaved for a couple of minutes and thrown on a bed of rice. This knowledge was actually very useful in college when all I had access to while the dining hall was closed was a microwave. Oh, and in spite of the shitty food, the Captain DS I worked at was immaculately clean. Story 22 I work at a Zaxby's Southeast USA chicken franchise, and if something fried hits the floor, we pick it back up and throw it back into the fryer, and then use it. Some guy did shove a piece of toast down his pants, but the only reason he did it was the guy in the drive-thru beat his ex-girlfriend, who is now his girlfriend. I recall him later on in the day saying, "Dude, my pubes are still buttery." Story 23 Somewhat along these lines. Make sure if you consistently order pizza delivery, be sure to tip. At our place, all the drivers had photographic memory of addresses that didn't tip. One time I saw a slice of pepperoni used to wipe clean the rim of the toilet before being thrown onto the pizza. Story 24. It's been a long time, but here goes. If you saw the bins that the raw chicken is stored in, you would never eat chicken again. They are usually stored in boxes above a metal tub that collects the blood as it drips out. Once you smell that and, coincidentally, are forced to clean them out, it's just not the same. Frozen hamburgers make excellent frisbees. If you try really hard, you can fit a 14 pounds cooked hamburger in your mouth before your manager sees you take it. The same is true for 5 chicken nuggets or a box of fries. Frozen cookie dough is awesome. Not the uncooked stuff you get in supermarkets, but the flash frozen kind that only restaurants get. Did I mention it's awesome if you tap the Coke dispenser button repeatedly? It doesn't have time to send out the seltzer, and you just get Coke syrup shakes uncontrollably. You can easily fit a large person 6 tall through a drive-through window. Yes, we definitely make fun of you. Yes, the dudes in the back cooking are checking out your girlfriend. Yes, those kids making minimum wage will with your food if you them off. No, they really don't want to hear your stories about life while they are waiting for your food. If you're nice, you stand a much better chance of clean food or free stuff. Yelling at them saying you're just gonna throw it out anyway will get you nowhere. It sounds good that they change the fryer grease at least once a week, until you've seen the bottom of a fryer after a week of use. It takes a friggin' putty knife to scrape that off the bottom. Related note: fryer grease on exposed heating elements catches fire really easily, and the automatic dry powder fire extinguishing hoods are super expensive to clean up and reset. Also, management doesn't like fires. Do not under any circumstances let your food touch the table. You will regret this decision. If the bathroom has a drop ceiling, the dudes in the men's room can crawl over the top to see the women's room. So look up when you go in the ladies' room. Yes, they drop your food all the time, and probably still serve it to you. Get used to it. Fried food that falls on the floor collects hair, dust and dirt extremely easily. But if you throw it in the fryer for 5 seconds, you can't tell. You can cook a hamburger in a fryer if the grill is off. Last but not least, there are a lot of sexy times that goes on in fast food places after dark, just not near the chicken blood vats. TLDR, don't eat at fast food places. Story 25. IHOP, they don't serve real butter. They don't even have any available upon request. It's a margarine butter blend. It's crazy to me that a restaurant that specializes in pancakes serves that. Story 26. I used to work at Home Depot, and let me tell you the horrible stuff that would go on. The plywood was stacked on shelves and left there overnight, sometimes for weeks at a time. The do-it-yourself concrete mix was hard as a rock, and the paint all starts the same color. They just add food coloring to it. Story 27. I work at Cold Stone, and we are terrible about everything. I assume it is just my location, and because I have an awful manager though, if our cakes expire, my manager makes us change the dates so we don't have to throw them out. I always wear gloves and am good with food, but my manager and some employees never wear gloves and touch cakes mix-ins with their bare hands. My manager has some dumb girlfriend who comes in and decorates cakes, and she always leaves her hair down and never wears gloves. Shell set candy and mix-ins on the bare counter, which who knows how long it's been since it was wiped off last. It's gross. Don't go to Cold Stone. Story 28. Delivered for Jimmy John's for a while. That place is meticulously clean. We don't make the dough, but everything else is prepared in shop. We slice all of the meats and cut all the veggies ourselves. Everything is pretty fresh. That said, it was still your typical thankless food service job. Apparently someone who lives 10 minutes away doesn't understand how crazy it is for them to be standing there with a sack of sandwiches 15 minutes later. $1 tip for you, in breaking your cookie next time. The food is really unhealthy, but no one in management ever talked about it ever. Story 29. Will never eat at a Subway again after working there. One, they don't wash the tomatoes. They go right from that crate they come in from Mexico, with all the dirt all over them, into the slicer too, then they use that slicer to slice your deli meat without cleaning it first. 3. The tuna salad is 1 bag tuna to 3 bags mayonnaise. No joke. 4. The olives and jalapeno peppers come in little bags that you have to slice open and drain, and they taught us to hang the bag over the dishwashing sink while they drain. That means that while we wash the dishes using industrial strength sterilizer, your peppers and olives are getting splashed with it. I could go on. Story 30. Auntie Anna's secret pretzel dipping solution is water and Arm Hammer baking soda. I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement that said I would not divulge that secret ingredient for 2 years after my employment had ended. Also 2, 4, 8 refrigerate. That is their recipe for lemonade. 2 butter-sized tubs of fresh squeezed lemons. Yes, we actually squeeze them in the back. 4 cups of sugar and fill the rest of the 8-quart container with water. Stir, then throw it in the fridge until it is cold. By butter tubs I mean about a 1-pound tub-sized container. Story 31. Half the time when you order DQ blizzards with extra stuff, you won't get it. Also, if you order a blizzard that isn't a basic flavor Oreo, Reese, Butterfinger such as Chocoholic, Strawberry Cheese Quake, Turtle Pecan, Brownie batter, the ingredients were more than likely grabbed in a handful by a bare hand that hadn't been washed in a while. I worked there a year and a half and never wore gloves, was never encouraged to wash my hands. The big wall in front of Treat Center is there for a reason. Story 32. This will get buried, but maybe some will read it. I worked at a Quiznos right when they started doing the 5 large sub deal, which was meant to compete with Subway. Right when we lowered the prices, we got instructions from corporate to start using less meat on the sandwiches. A large used to have 6 ounces of meat. After the promotion started, we were supposed to put 5 ounces of meat on the larges. Not really a huge scandal, but I thought it was a pretty cheap way to cut corners and mislead people. Story 33. I used to work at an Applebee's as a busboy, one of many food service jobs. Many of these might only be true for our particular store, whatever. Everyone in the back was either Mexican or black, and they were more like microwave jockeys than cooks. They cooked steaks and fried things on the flat grill, but really most vegetables came in little plastic bags. Nuke the bag for X seconds, dump on the plate and serve. One guy lost his job because he'd have his girlfriend call in to go orders, then never pick them up. The guys in the kitchen loved the free food, but eventually he bragged too loudly and got fired for about 6 months of fake orders. Most of our managers were pretty cool, but one in particular was a true. He wasn't allowed to do any hiring because he'd only hire hot girls and he'd try to trade for guaranteed job placement. A few times he tried cornering some waitresses in the walk-in freezer, but there were 2 black guys in the kitchen crew that were stand-up homies and kept making up excuses to get from the freezer anytime he tried. There were 2 skanky who got him fired when they found out that their special for favors deal was applying to the other as well. All the other managers were cool, but he always made for interesting stories. When I had free time, I would spend almost all of it in back practicing my Spanish with the Mexicans in back. Spoiler, you're a waitress and just walked in back. 90 of what they're talking about is how hot you area rent and what they do to you if they could. I learned words and phrases that would make a sailor cringe. One guy in particular, Poppy, he was a 50-something old guy, cool as and always helpful when I messed up my Spanish. He worked every day. He had 1 day off in the 3 years I worked there, and halfway through his day off he stopped by to see how things were going. He lived in his beat-up van and I'm pretty sure he ate mostly sent back food. Poor guy, he was awesome though. Once I figured out how to speak decent Spanish, we'd talk about philosophical like the meaning of life and what life was like in Mexico. One day I discovered that busboys got tip share. Keep in mind, this was my first food service job. I was a stupid high school kid. The reason why was because the managers kept all the tip share in envelopes for each employee, and mine was overflowing the envelope and could I please come get it? It's starting to take up room in the safe. I had something around 250 if I recall. I wadded up the whole thing and tucked it under Papa's windshield wiper. Never told the Poppy story to anybody before internet. Keep my secret. Former Starbucks barista here. No horror stories, but I always find a way to exploit any retail POS when I'm bored. There are multiple ways to charge for the exact same drink, oftentimes much cheaper than the menu price. X an iced venti latte is $4, a doppio 2 espresso shots is $1.95, and a cup of ice with 2 add shots is $1.20, because you can add as much cold milk as you want from the condiment bar, that island full of sugar packets and carafes to whatever you're drinking. You can always ask for an iced venti doppio, pay $1.95, then add the milk yourself. Half-price lattes. The cup of ice was something I'd do for the regulars. Don't expect to talk your way into getting that. Also, at least at my store, free drinks for uniform officers, firemen and military. I also gave away drinks to teachers because that's why. Story 3. For just because you're by the ocean, doesn't mean the seafood you're being served is any fresher. It's all the same Cisco US foods whatever no matter where you go. Story 35. I traveled around India for a while, and can say these stories are pretty tame here. This is just observed by me. Samosas dropped on filthy ground of a train, brushed off and back for sale, used newspaper for plates, and random bits of cardboard business cards, flyers etc. for spoons. Cockroaches in food, phlegm hawking and nose wiping by waiters and chefs, while serving and cooking. A cook that must sweep away the hundreds of flies chilling on his big bowl of chaat snacks like Indian chips and salsa before serving you a plate, and by plate I mean old newspaper. Story 36. Noodles and Company's deep dark secret. I can't even think of anything. Veggies are cut fresh twice a day, more if we're busy. Noodles are cooked fresh once or twice a day and kept in a lidded cooler until ready for use. Sauce veggie noodle cooler temps are checked 2 to 3 times a day. Entire restaurant is broken down and cleaned at close every night. We cut fruit fresh for salads because we don't sell enough for it to not turn brown. I know, it's a scary place. Story 37. I worked at Domino's and Papa John's and Sam's, for those in the know, for years in my teens and early 20s. Mostly pretty above board, sanitation-wise. There's a definite 3 to 5 second rule, but the floors are kept very clean and no piece of dirt is going to make it through that oven. Fully 95 of the people I ever worked with at all of those places was baked constantly, but if you don't want people that are stoned making your food, you're gonna have to cut down on your food sources drastically. There was also rampant drug use and distribution from a highest level, in one store specifically, that I won't mention. It was pretty spectacular though, very organized, weight kept in ceiling, smaller amounts stored in drivers' locked cash boxes on the wall. Relevant orders were transferred to someone complicit in the operation, all of the managers, GM, 2 assistant, shift, 2 of the drivers, and 1 of the insiders who would take a normal order and upon completion, go unlock an appropriately stuffed cubbyhole, and remove X amount of reefer slosed fungus occasional and either hand it to someone who is boxing pizzas that knows what's going on, or take over themselves. Depending on what the food narcotic was, it would either be placed in the box with the real food, or just put in an extra chicken tenders box. The food is then stuck inside a heat bag and put under a lamp, usually already assigned to one of the 2 special drivers, or if it's to be picked up, marked "Do Not Touch" and left in the bag for purposes of identification, and to avoid someone opening it innocently and becoming enlightened. Person pays plus extra. Whoever was involved gets an appropriate amount of later that night. It was beautiful. TLDR cool story about a whole major pizza chain store selling drugs out of pizza boxes. Story 38 Not really a fast food restaurant, but if you're ever at AMC theaters and you want free popcorn, ask for a cardboard tray filled with it. The trays are free, and there is no limit to how many we can give you, and if you want free soda, same thing goes, ask for a courtesy cup or multiple courtesy cups filled with your drink of choice. They are also free and there's no limit on how many we're allowed to give you. Also don't order hot dogs or pizza at AMC, just don't, trust me. Story 39 I used to work at a Speedway when they started making a lot of their own kinds of food sandwiches, pizzas, things like that. Stuff we'd put in an oven and assemble. Dirty secret, we rarely made sure the times were right, so people ate a lot of old sandwiches. No one ever seemed to notice. They weren't good quality, so getting a little soggy or whatever didn't affect it much. Oh, and I swear during breakfast times, I ate more bacon than I put on the sandwiches. That at least was delicious. Story 40 Strange. From all I read here, American Burger Kings are nice and clean, whereas McDonald's is disgusting and puts poo in their burgers. I'm German and a ton of my friends have worked at a fast food joint. One opinion: McDonald's is nice, clean, and they use fresh ingredients. Burger King has dirty kitchens and their meat stays on the grill all day. Strange how that would change when crossing the Atlantic D. Story 41 Previous Denny's current Italian restaurant cook. Whenever something is dropped on the floor, we just put it in the fryer boiler for a few seconds and serve it. The waiting ball game was played regularly. Story 42 Most novelty bakeries don't bake their goods. I worked at a popular mall bakery and we froze everything we sold. We didn't even have an oven on site. It was so gross. Edit see my comment reply to Hawklineror. Also, this was a very small chain with just a few stores, not a large national franchise or anything like that. Story 43 Let's see crazy fast food stories. Worked at a pizza place. Accidentally dropped an entire block of cheese the size of my arm on the floor. Went to toss it. Manager came up freaking out. Thought I was gonna get in for ruining that much cheese. He said don't throw it out. Dusts it off and hands it back to me. Gave him the old "are you kidding me" and walked out. KFC we would re-deep fry things that sat out too long. When chopping tomatoes for those wraps, half the tomatoes would be moldy and rotten, so we would just hack off the bad parts and serve the rest. Subway never broke compliance. There was one time when someone wrote in fake temperatures in the temp log.